It was November 14th, 1954, a Tuesday that felt colder than any winter the almanac had predicted. The wind was whipping off the Hudson River, cutting through the avenues of Harlem like a switchblade, rattling the windows of the brownstones and sending trash spiraling into the gray sky. But inside the private back room of the Flash Inn on McComb's Place, the air was still. It was a terrifying kind of stillness, the kind that settles over a forest just before a predator snaps the neck of its prey. The clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic, deliberate turning of pages. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat at a mahogany table, a single lamp illuminating his face, casting deep shadows that made his eyes look like two dark tunnels leading into a very dangerous place. He wasn't counting stacks of cash. He wasn't cleaning a pistol. He was reading a ledger, a simple, black-bound notebook with red columns. To understand the gravity of this moment, you have to understand the man holding the pen. They called him the Godfather of Harlem, but that title was too small for him. Bumpy wasn't just a gangster. He was the infrastructure of a place the rest of America wanted to forget. When the city stopped paving the roads, Bumpy's crews filled the potholes. When the landlords turned off the heat in December, Bumpy paid for the coal. And when the government forgot that black children needed to eat to learn, Bumpy established the Harlem Youth Sustenance Fund. It was a fancy name for a simple operation. Money from the numbers racket was washed, dried, and funneled into buying milk, textbooks, and winter coats for the kids at PS 113 and half a dozen other schools uptown. It was the rent he paid for his crown. It was the pact he made with the people. You see, Bumpy knew something that the Italians downtown never quite grasped. A king doesn't rule by fear alone. He rules because the people believe he is the only thing standing between them and the wolves. Sitting across from Bumpy, sweating through a suit that cost more than a school teacher made in a year, was Lester the Ledger Vance. Lester wasn't a soldier. He had hands as soft as a manicurist and eyes that were always darting, always calculating. He had been with Bumpy since the chaotic days of the war with Dutch Schultz. Lester was a wizard with numbers. He could make money disappear from the IRS and reappear in a community center renovation fund without leaving a ripple. He was family. He was trusted. And that was why he was currently the most doomed man on the island of Manhattan. Bumpy turned another page. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. He didn't look up. He just ran a manicured finger down a column of expenses labeled November Procurement, Dairy and Literature. He took a drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling up around his head like a halo of gray thought. "Lester," Bumpy said. His voice wasn't loud. Bumpy never yelled. He didn't have to. When you hold the power of life and death, a whisper is more deafening than a scream. "Do you know why I like chess?" Lester swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing against his tight collar. He tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "Because it's a thinking man's game, Bumpy. Strategy." "Because of the rules, Lester," Bumpy corrected, finally looking up. His face was a mask of stone. "The bishop moves diagonally. The rook moves straight. The knight makes the turn. Every piece has a nature. Every piece has a purpose. If a bishop tries to move like a rook, the game falls apart. The board loses its integrity." Bumpy closed the ledger. "You've been moving like a rook, Lester. But you're just a pawn who forgot where he was standing." Lester's laugh was brittle, nervous, cracking in the middle. "I don't follow, Bumpy. The books are balanced. I stayed up 3 nights making sure the vigorous matches the output. The Italians are happy, the cops are paid." "I'm not talking about the Italians," Bumpy said, standing up. He moved with a grace that belied his size, a panther in a bespoke suit. "I'm talking about the milk, Lester. I'm talking about the books for the third graders at PS 113. I'm talking about the fact that for the last 6 months, the invoices from the dairy supplier say we paid for 3,000 gallons. But the cafeteria ladies tell me they've been watering down the milk since September. The air left the room. Lester went pale, the color draining from his face as if someone had pulled a plug. He started to stammer, his hands shaking as he reached for a glass of water that he knocked over instead. Bumpy, listen, it's a mistake, a clerical error. The supplier, they must be shorting us. I'll handle it. I'll go down there tomorrow and break some legs. Bumpy walked around the table and placed a hand on Lester's shoulder. It wasn't a comforting touch. It was heavy, like a tombstone. Don't lie to me, Lester. I checked the supplier. They were paid in full. But the money didn't come from our account. It came from a shell company you set up. You've been skimming the difference. You've been taking the cream and leaving the children with water. Bumpy leaned in close, bringing the smell of expensive tobacco and impending violence. And I know why. It's the powder, isn't it? You've got a monkey on your back the size of a gorilla, and you're feeding it with the lunch money of orphans. Lester crumbled. He fell out of his chair, landing on his knees, clutching at Bumpy's pant leg. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with the snot and the sweat. Bumpy, please! I'm sick! I didn't mean to hurt the kids. I was gonna put it back. I swear on my mother's grave, I was gonna win big on the ponies next week and put it all back. We're brothers, Bumpy. 20 years! You can't do this over a few $1,000s. I'm your guy. I'm Lester. Bumpy looked down at him with an expression that was terrifyingly devoid of anger. It was disappointment. It was the look of a man who sees a tool that is broken and can no longer be fixed. Get up, Bumpy said. We're going for a ride. Where? Where are we going, Bumpy? To the river? Please, not the river, Lester wailed. No, Bumpy said, buttoning his jacket. We're going to school. The ride to the school was silent. Bumpy drove his own car that night, a black Cadillac Fleetwood that glided over the cracked pavement of Harlem like a phantom ship. Lester sat in the passenger seat, sobbing quietly, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Outside the windows, the streets of Harlem passed by. They passed the corners where men stood around burning trash barrels to stay warm. They passed the stoops where grandmothers sat keeping watch over the neighborhood. Bumpy looked at them, his people. He saw the struggle in the way a woman walked, carrying heavy grocery bags. He saw the dignity in the way a man shined his shoes even though his suit was 10 years old. This was his kingdom, and a king protects his own. They pulled up in front of the elementary school just as the sun was beginning to threaten the horizon. It was early, hours before the first bell, but the janitor, an old man named Silas, who owed Bumpy a favor for keeping his son out of prison, unlocked the side door. Bumpy marched Lester through the dark, echoing hallways. The school smelled of floor wax, old paper, and the lingering scent of boiled vegetables. It was the smell of poverty, but also the smell of hope. Bumpy pushed Lester into a classroom on the first floor. Rows of small wooden desks faced a blackboard covered in yesterday's math lesson. Sit, Bumpy commanded. Lester collapsed into the teacher's chair, looking small and pathetic against the backdrop of the alphabet chart on the wall. Bumpy walked to the window and looked out at the playground. It was a concrete slab with a rusted basketball hoop. You know, Lester, Bumpy began, his back to the man, when I started this thing of ours, I knew we'd have to do bad things. We sell numbers. We run emotional protection. We break the law because the law wasn't written for us. But there was always a line that separated us from the animals. He turned around. We don't steal from the poor. We don't steal from our own. And we definitely don't steal from children. I know, Bumpy. I know, Lester wept. I'll pay it back. I'll work for free. Just don't kill me. Bumpy walked over to the desk. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket. It was a beautiful, terrible thing, with a pearl handle and a blade that gleamed even in the dim light. He placed it on the desk in front of Lester. Then he walked to the door and opened it. "Here is the situation, Lester," Bumpy said, his voice as calm as a judge delivering a sentence. "Outside that door, in about 2 hours, this hallway is going to fill up with children. And behind those children will be their mothers, hard-working women, maids, cooks, laundresses, women who scrub floors on their hands and knees downtown so their babies can have a carton of milk and a book to read." Bumpy checked his watch. "I have made a few phone calls. Word is spreading on the street right now. They know someone stole the food out of their babies' mouths. They don't know it was you yet. But if you walk out that door, I will tell them. I will tell every mother in Harlem that Lester Vance is the reason their child is hungry today." Lester stared at the open door, his eyes widening in horror. He knew what that meant. The police might arrest you. The Italians might shoot you. But a mob of Harlem mothers, fueled by righteous fury and protective instinct, they wouldn't just kill him. They would tear him apart. It would be slow, and it would be agonizing. It was a death without honor, a death of absolute shame. "Or," Bumpy continued, pointing to the knife on the desk, "you can take the exit that leaves your family with a shred of dignity. You take the knife. You do what needs to be done. And tomorrow, I will tell the neighborhood that Lester Vance died of a heart attack while working late to secure more funding for the school. I will pay for your funeral. I will make sure your wife and kids never want for anything. Your name remains clean. The kids get their milk." Lester looked at the knife. Then he looked at the door. "Bumpy, you can't. I'm your friend." "You were my friend," Bumpy said, his eyes cold and hard. "Then you became a thief who stole from the innocent. My money, Lester, you could have taken. If you had come to me and said, 'Bumpy, I'm in deep, I need 10 grand, I would have given it to you. Hell, I would have given you 20, because that's just paper. That's just business. But the kids' money? The hope of this community? You sold your soul for a bag of powder, Lester. And now the devil has come to collect." Bumpy stepped out into the hallway. "I'll wait in the car. You have until the first bell rings." The door clicked shut. Bumpy Johnson walked out of the school, his footsteps echoing on the asphalt. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He got into his Cadillac, lit a cigarette, and waited. The sun was fully up now. The neighborhood was waking up. He saw a young girl walking down the street with a backpack that was too big for her. She was skipping, happy, unaware of the drama unfolding in the classroom she was heading toward. Bumpy watched her, and a flicker of sadness crossed his face, gone as quickly as it came. He sat there for 10 minutes. The silence of the morning was heavy. Then, from inside the school, there was no scream. There was no gunshot. Just a silence that somehow felt different than before. A final kind of silence. Moments later, Silas, the janitor, came running out of the side door, waving his arms, his face pale. He ran to the car window. "Mr. Johnson! Mr. Johnson! It's Mr. Vance! He's—" "Oh, God, there's blood everywhere. He cut his own throat." Bumpy didn't blink. He took a long drag of his cigarette and exhaled the smoke into the cold morning air. "A tragedy, Silas. A terrible tragedy. He must have been under a lot of pressure. He worked too hard for this community." Bumpy reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of bills. He peeled off a stack and handed it to the shaking janitor. "Clean it up, Silas, before the kids get there. Burn the chair, scrub the floor. I don't want a single drop of blood where the children learn their ABCs. Do you understand me?" Yes, Mr. Johnson. Yes, sir. And Silas, Bumpy added, his voice dropping an octave, turning the air in the car to ice. Make sure the milk delivery arrives on time today. Double order. On me. Bumpy rolled up the window. As the Cadillac pulled away, merging into the morning traffic of 125th Street, he wasn't just a gangster leaving a crime scene. He was a gardener who had just pulled a weed. He had pruned the tree of Harlem so that it could grow stronger. The legend of that morning spread like wildfire, though never in print, never in the papers. It was whispered in the barbershops on 135th Street, debated in the jazz clubs like Minton's Playhouse, and murmured in the church pews on Sunday. They said that Bumpy Johnson loved Harlem so much that he would cut off his own right hand if it tried to steal from the people. They said his justice was colder than the grave, but fairer than the courts. Lester Vance had a beautiful funeral. The flower arrangements were spectacular. Bumpy stood in the front row, his head bowed, comforting Lester's weeping widow. He looked every bit the grieving friend. But when he turned to face the congregation, when he looked out at the hustlers, the runners, and the lieutenants who made up his empire, his eyes sent a message that was clearer than any sermon. There are rules, his eyes said. There is the game, and there is the community. You can play the game, but you never, ever touch the community. If you cross that line, there is no place on earth you can hide. Not from the law, not from the Italians, and certainly not from me. That was the paradox of Bumpy Johnson. He was a violent man who enforced peace. He was a criminal who demanded honor. He was a killer who saved lives. In the grand, bloody chessboard of New York City, where the pieces were moving in a chaotic dance of greed and power, Bumpy sat above it all, the grand master who saw the whole board. He knew that a king without a kingdom is nothing. And on that cold November morning, he proved that he was willing to water the roots of his kingdom with the blood of his closest friend to keep it alive. This is why, decades later, when old men in Harlem talk about the days of old, they don't talk about Bumpy with the disdain they saved for the drug dealers who came later, the ones who burned the neighborhood down for a quick buck. No, they speak his name with a complicated kind of reverence. They nod their heads and say, Bumpy, yeah, he was a bad man, but he was our bad man. Because in a world that wanted to crush them, Bumpy Johnson taught them that even in the gutter, you could still have a code. You could still have dignity. And if you were one of Bumpy's children, you would always have your milk, even if he had to kill the devil himself to get it for you. The ledger of Harlem was balanced that day, not with ink, but with the iron will of a man who decided that some things were simply not for sale. This story of Lester and the Milk Fund might be apocryphal. Maybe it happened exactly like that. Maybe it didn't. But in Harlem, the truth isn't just about facts. It's about what a man stood for. And Bumpy Johnson stood for the idea that a black man in America could be a king. And a king's law is absolute. So ask yourself, if you were sitting in that classroom, staring at the knife and the door, knowing who was waiting for you outside, would you have made a different choice? I didn't think so. That is the power of Bumpy Johnson.